And good afternoon, and welcome to my presentation here on the current moves in Australia higher education as we move towards some online teaching as a result of the coronavirus. So what I'm going to do is just going to start off by giving us a little bit of a good afternoon and welcome. Get rid of the feedback and play our introduction from our National Conference Chair.
Stafford Lumsden of the University of Wollongong in Australia will give us Timeline of an Outbreak, Australian higher education moving to online teaching in response to novel coronavirus 19. The beginning of the 2020 academic year will forever be remembered as being ever so disruptive due to the calamity that is COVID-19. This presentation provides a chronological narrative of one university's response to the pandemic. It examines the challenges the university faced transferring the entire student body online and the important learning and discoveries that occurred along the way. Finally, it considers the impact the 2020 pandemic will have on remote and online learning for the future. Lumsden is a technology-enhanced learning and education specialist and a longtime member of KOTESOL. He actually chaired the national conference a few moons ago. I am pleased to present Stafford Lumsden.
Indeed, thank you very much. Okay, so just before we start, a little bit about me and how we might go about interacting with each other over the next 40 or so minutes. I'm both in the chat in Slack, and I will be taking a look at the chat in the live stream on YouTube. So if you want to throw me any questions you might have about the things that I talk about into one of those two avenues, I will try and have a look at them and sort of respond to them in line as we go along. And this might be a good opportunity for me to ask someone to let me know in the Slack chat if everything's going all right at this stage, if you can hear me, if it's all kosher. Just pop me a message in Slack there in the featured-COVID chat room or channel, and we'll see if everyone is on board. So a little bit about me. Some of the older folk will remember me from my days in Korea and as various roles and things in KoreaTESOL. Was the chapter president of Seoul for some time. I was national conference chair and various other things along the way. But about 2 years ago, I was lucky enough to receive a scholarship to go to Macquarie University to undertake my PhD, and one of the stipulations was I needed to be in Australia in order to do that. So I moved to Australia, where I took up a job as a technology-enhanced learning and education specialist. And of late, that has manifested by way of helping an entire institution put its offerings online in a very short time period, basically in response to the coronavirus outbreak. So to start with, I want to give you a little bit of background in terms of what the higher education sector looks like in Australia. Australia is almost dependent on international students. There is a large number of international students in higher education. And this graph from the end of 2018 shows that there is upwards of almost 500,000 students in Australian universities that come from outside of Australia, and I would posit that a large number of them are Chinese nationals. There are a large number of Indian nationals. There are definitely some Koreans. We have a large Korean cohort in my university. And so, when all of a sudden something happens to those cohorts of international students, you need to adjust what you're doing and where you're doing it and how you're doing it to take that into consideration. Indeed, Australia has the highest number of international students per 100,000 people in the population in the world, dwarfing the United States, for example, the United Kingdom and Canada, Australia's 3 largest international student competitors. So, yeah, China is definitely the largest market for Australian international students. And as we know, in early January, while Australia was dealing with bushfires, and indeed my university has a number of campuses throughout New South Wales, and those campuses are in rural areas, we were dealing with these bushfires, and the whole sort of coronavirus thing didn't register on people's radars immediately, as this was happening quite far away in Wuhan in China. What happens is that generally our international students, but especially our Chinese students, will go home at Christmas and will come back to Australia just after the Chinese New Year, or what we would call Solal in Korea, to universities throughout the country. But University of Wollongong, where I'm based on the east coast, and the University of Macquarie University, where I'm also studying. So we would expect to see at about mid-January a large number of Chinese students arriving in the country. But of course, that didn't happen this year, and as a result of both quarantine regimes in China and the Australian government deciding that it was going to prevent arrivals of foreign nationals who had not been outside of China for at least 14 days, that left students stuck in China. And the second and third largest groups of international students there were from India and Nepal. So we had the situation where all of a sudden our students had paid a good amount of money to come and study in Australia, and they were no longer able to arrive. So this presented, as you can imagine, quite a problem. And so what we wanted to do, if I just go back for a second, is figure out how we were going to deal with this. The common problem across numerous universities, not only here in New South Wales, but across Australia, and I imagine across New Zealand as well, some of those other countries in that graph, and indeed a very similar problem to what instructors in Korea were dealing with at the time. Even if there wasn't necessarily students in China, it was domestic students in Korea unable or unwilling to travel to class to have classes. And fair enough. We've since learned that the coronavirus is, became a pandemic. It's highly contagious, and it's not very pleasant. So, and I should say it was about that time, if some of you recall, that the TESOL Media Lab started checking in with people both in Korea and in Australia to see, how things were going. Now, I just want to take a short diversion and just talk about the TESOL Media Lab for a second if you're not familiar with it. The TESOL Media Lab is essentially a collective of TESOL instructors, mostly TESOL trainers, based in Australia, based in Korea, and based in Japan. And when all of this started to go down, those of us who were in the collective, who were in Australia, started making calls, started asking, is there anything that we can do to help? Is there anything that you need? Do you just want to have a chat? It sounds awfully stressful. We did this thinking that it would never affect us here in Australia because we were so far away. More on that in a moment. So yeah, TML, like I say, is a collective of TESOL educators and teacher trainers. And we're interested in promoting two things specifically. First, and most importantly, is that communication between TESOL instructors and TESOL trainers. Because what we do is inherently communicative, inherently community-based, and this kind of stuff, the national conference this year, proves that borders, distance don't really matter when it comes to establishing that community. The other thing we're really interested in as a group is the promotion and the conducting of research on TESOL through the lens of multimodality. So as I say, we've got fellows in Korea and the United States and Hong Kong and Japan and Australia. And there's a small cadre of what we call senior fellows who are usually have 10 plus years of experience in teaching English and TESOL training, probably have one or, in my case, 2 advanced degrees in TESOL, going for a third. And yeah, we try and bring people together to talk about TESOL and research TESOL through multimodality. So what we needed to do when we're missing our Chinese students was to find, what are we going to do? How are we going to bring our subjects? Because of course at the university it's not just languages, it's everything from business to engineering to computing, you name it, education. How are we going to bring that university experience to our students in China? So the first thing we needed to do was identify, what faculties, what schools, and what subjects were impacted by students unable to be in class. We also needed to establish a common point of not only contact, but a common point of information. This is all happening in the 8 or 9 days before the beginning of the semester here in Australia. So time was precious. So to avoid sending out mixed messages, having a single point of contact and through which information flowed to instructors was really important. We also needed, of course, to figure out what technology was going to work for us in China. There's obviously no YouTube in China, there's no Google products, so we needed to not only find but then test products so that we knew they worked, that they were fit for purpose, and so we were able to, as a team, the team that I belong to, make some decisions and contact some local people, some boots on the ground, to give things a little bit of a test in order to make sure that everything was working. And then having established what we were going to do and how we were going to do it, we needed to narrow things down to just 2 narrowly defined modes of delivery. Okay, we wanted to assume only the basics. We wanted to try and remove as much confusion from the process, both for students and for instructors, so that we only decided that we were going to have asynchronous weekly lectures, so basically lecture recordings, and synchronous consultations or synchronous office hours, and that was going to happen through Zoom, which, of course, we are all wonderfully familiar with at this point. So that is my team on the left, our team of Technology Enhanced Learning Education Specialists, or TEL Ed specialists. And in a very short amount of time, we provided our instructors who were impacted by the absence of their Chinese students the fundamentals to be able to conduct their subjects via Zoom. So addressing the 600 students that were impacted, our team provided around about 12 hours of workshops over 6 days to about 50 instructors. We created 6 remote teaching support sites, so one for each faculty in the university, and one remote study support site for the students. So those sites gave each team, if you will, the instructors and the students, gave them the sort of the fundamentals, the how-tos, the help documents that they would need in order to progress through the semester in China via Zoom. And in addition, where there was time, we conducted a number of sort of one-to-one and small group consultations with instructors to help them out with specific problems or things that were specific to their subject area that needed to be taken into account. And so we started the semester with our instructors teaching to China via Zoom. And they all lived happily ever after the end. Except, of course, they didn't. Because the semester started, and a week later, we received confirmation that a case of coronavirus had been found in Australia. And so, after only 2 weeks, I think, of our domestic students attending university, we had to very quickly stop that. Now, there are this actually caused a fair amount of contention in that a number of universities, or all of the universities, in fact, decided to do things differently. The government didn't actually proclaim a specific policy for universities or schools, for that matter, for at least a month after the first case was reported in Australia. So we had our domestic students who came to university, but it was increasingly becoming clear that if you have 30,000 students turn up at one place or across a couple of campuses, that's going to be a significant sort of breeding ground for a virus, in amongst all of the other things that university students have. So my university decided to bring the mid-semester break forward by 3 weeks to the end of the second week, and to move all teaching online. So everything, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 research related subjects or centres, the entire university, undergraduate, postgraduate, is going online. So the first thing that we had to do, it was kind of lucky that 2 weeks previous we'd had sort of a micro or a model to look at. We'd had a dry run at this, but now we were going for volume. So we wanted to take that, but streamline the process even further so that we could use it at scale. And start thinking about what are the core components of teaching online. And we started with, I think, somewhere between 8 and 10 components of teaching online. And there was one afternoon where there was some seriously heated discussion, and we narrowed that down to 5. And you see them here. So the first one is the design of the online learning environment. Whatever we're going to give to the students to look at on their computers or on their phones, what does it look like? Is it accessible? Is it clear? All of those sorts of things. The second part is preparing our online lectures. What are we going to do? How are we going to get the information to the students? And like our approach with our Chinese students, we decided that this is probably going to be asynchronous. It's going to be pre-recorded lectures that students can watch and then respond to somehow. But there was also a push to make sure that there was still some live interaction between students and their instructors. Because as some of you will have found, the ability to keep our students motivated and interested in all of this while doing it via their computer is quite low, or it's quite difficult to maintain that motivation. So getting them to interact with each other and their instructors in a live setting is really important. And that sort of flowed into our fourth component, the idea that online social presence and the building of community through discussion is really, really important. And so we wanted that to be a part of what we were going to give to our instructors as they started going online. And finally, how are we going to deal with assessment and feedback, both formative assessment during the course of the semester, as well as some more formal assessment. Now, formal assessment I'll get to in a minute because there are still a few issues. But so we've gone from design to develop. How are we going to develop? What was going to be developed out of this process? And we settled on a website, or we actually used the Moodle LMS, so this is all in Moodle. But we decided that we wanted a repository of all of the online resources for the instructors in one place, so that they could access tools, they could access examples, and they could get links to further pieces of information. And you'll see here I've highlighted the section that I was responsible for, the social... No, sorry, this isn't the one I was responsible for. This is a nice one. The online social presence discussion. But this is a good model of all of the different modules the 5 modules we taught. They all had a message from our students about that particular area or topic. It provided sort of the 5 key things that you needed to do in this area for success. And it also gave our instructors opportunities to discuss problems and maybe find solutions with each other through a discussion forum, and a space for them to do a few tasks that we created that facilitated reflection and a little bit of planning time on their part to address, how are they going to do this transition from face-to-face to online. Now, in addition, it was really important that we give our instructors information from the student's perspective. So one of the things we did in the essentially 2 weeks, 10 work days, between the end of online or the end of face-to-face kinds of courses to online, was to round up a bunch of students and ask them some questions about what they thought about these 5 different areas. So here is our students talking about online assessment. We're just going to see if we can't play this for a minute and give you an idea of what we were asking them to do.
Hi, and welcome.
Just realised that's not the right video. It's that one there. There it is.
I think every student appreciates individual feedback given from assignments and classroom forums. I think that students should have the ability to continue to have consultations and phone calls at certain hours with their tutors in order to get that feedback that they would get even in a face-to-face environment.
So I'd really hope for the feedback to be as clear and as precise as it would be in person, and also having the opportunity to make online appointments after we receive the feedback to go over it in more detail and clarify anything that we didn't understand.
With my nursing studies, a lot of it has always been online anyway. All our feedback is always online. I think just knowing that if we want any further clarification, that can be facilitated, whether that's via a separate additional email or the opportunity to talk to the assessor, whether that's through like a Zoom interview or a phone call, just being able to clarify any points that might not come across through just the words we're given on the marking sheet.
We wouldn't want to lose any of the quality of feedback that you'd get when you would normally get it in a face-to-face environment. So typically I find that we get a lot of feedback over email anyway, and that's obviously something that doesn't need to change. But I know a lot of people also find comfort in having a conversation with their tutor, with their lecturer, subject coordinator, whoever, about have access to that outside of the normal class times, to be able to have that as almost like a meeting room, to be able to chat as face-to-face as you can, like have two webcams going, have your mics going, and get feedback that way in a more face-to-face way that people might be more comfortable with.
So as far as online assessments, it'd be really great if there were areas and times where you could go one-on-one with your subject coordinators and ask them really specific questions about your assessment tasks and about how you're going, instead of just always having to use like the chat functions over a big area.
So for online assessments, I think most of my teachers actually kind of already do that. Like we have to submit it on Turnitin and then we get our feedback on Turnitin. So I'm kind of already pretty, confident that that's going to stay pretty good. But for things like, I have a lot of praxis to the same extent would be great.
All right, so I am going to stop that there because it does go on for another 3 or so minutes. But like I say, it's really important that we put the students up front so that our educators or our instructors could see that, what they were doing in this transition to online actually had an effect on their students, and their students were just as worried as they were. In fact, the instructors were probably a little less, we're a little more worried than the students, who are quite used to doing most of their living almost online, as opposed to sort of older professorial types. So, in addition, it needed to be a two-way kind of discussion. So we decided to model the kinds of introductory videos that we wanted our instructors to make. And so I helped build the online assessment and feedback module of our approach. And this is my colleague Fiona, who with me, we did a little introduction video. I should sort of say that I have a complete sort of video team at my disposal at the university. So these are professionally filmed, cut, and edited, and the turnaround was sort of 24 hours. Certainly, if you're an individual English teacher working at a university in Korea, you've got to adjust your expectations accordingly, which is not to say that you can't go and stand in your classroom or just a space with a good phone and do something just as effective. So because I think this is a funny video, because I look ridiculous, I'm just going to play you a few seconds of it and then we'll move on. Hi, and welcome to this module on online assessment. We're going to explore 4 steps to make your assessments ready for remote and online delivery.
First, we'll look at your current assessment tasks and how ready they are to be in the online environment. Second, we'll look at all the different support materials that your students will need to complete their assessment tasks. We'll help you gather those together and put them in your Moodle site. Third, we'll look at the different submission options and how your assessment tasks can be submitted online. And finally, we'll look at marking efficiencies and how we can help you to mark efficiently online.
We hope that you find this module useful, and we look forward to supporting you as you make your assessments available online. So clearly I'd had a shave that day. Hadn't been working from home for over a month and not shaving. Also, a pro tip is not to turn up to your film, your 9:30 call for the camera after a big night out. So what we did was to deliver all of that. I think we did, we had this really cool site that had all of these cool resources in it that were going to help our teachers, and they were going to be ready to deliver their content online. And we were just going to have some face-to-face workshops. We're going to have some face-to-face workshops just to give them a little bit of confidence and to answer any specific questions, and then we all lived happily ever after. Except, of course, we didn't. So it was sort of 10 working days, maybe 2 days into it, it was decided that the campus was going to be closed, and indeed the government decided to institute social distancing. And so the idea of getting sort of 50 educators in a room at a time to talk them through the process of putting their content online became impractical. And this is probably the best example of a good social distancing that I've seen. You're to remain 1.5 meters apart from each other at all times. That's at least one adult kangaroo in length. That very Australian measurement of how many kangaroos apart are you. So we decided, or we had to, we didn't have a decision in this one, it was made for us. We needed to take all of what we did and deliver it 100% online. And so we used a combination of Zoom and Cisco WebEx, which is our institution's preferred video conferencing platform, to deliver 160 hours of workshops over 10 days, or 9 days I think it was in the end, to a total of 1,700 instructors. Instructors of different levels, different disciplines, of course, different subjects, but we ran the gamut from casual tutors to subject coordinators to associate professors and professors, and indeed there's nothing like having a deputy vice chancellor just wander into your WebEx video conference and sit there for the whole 2 hours and listen to you talk about assessment. The website that the Moodle site that we created over those 10 days received something like 45,000 hits. I can't tell you how much coffee was drunk during that time, and 3/4 of it was delivered from home. So I think I ended up doing maybe the first and second days from my office, and then we were told that we had to work from home, and so the rest of it I did from right here. So it's a big project that happened over the course of a very short time, and you as instructors in Korea will know that you often get these things arrive on your desk, and you're expected to do them within minutes. It was very much a case of that here. And thus far, I think we've been reasonably successful. We are now, I want to say, so it must be 2.5, almost 3 weeks into remote delivery. The entire university, again, delivering everything online. And that has proved to be difficult. If you think about subjects like history and philosophy, it's fairly easy. You can do recorded lectures, you can give students readings, activities, and so on. But things like sciences, medicine, those things that require practical laboratory work are proving to be difficult, and that's where a lot of my work is now, is addressing those more niche kind of issues. But in terms of feedback, we had some nice things from our instructors that sort of made us feel pretty good about ourselves. One of them here is, I just wanted to say that the resources are absolutely fantastic. Well, of course they are, we made them. But the second bit here, it is life-saving and has given shape and articulation to my online teaching plan for subjects in science. So our instructors, knew what they wanted to teach, and they knew how they were going to teach it, broadly speaking, online. But what we were able to provide was the ability to sort of shape that in terms of best practice, and also shape that in terms of some of the more practical implementation kinds of things. In regard to the student messages, the video showing a message from students and regarding the transition from from face-to-face to online, re-inspired, if that's a word, this teacher, and re-inflated their flat tire, reigniting my energy and motivation to deliver a high-quality course and find better ways to connect with and care for my students online. To me, that's my job done. The ability to hear from a teacher that said, look, because you've provided us with this stuff, I feel confident enough now to go on and do what I need to do. And that re-inspires me as a teacher and a course designer as well. Just from a practical sense, the navigation through the site is crystal clear. Steps for success, objectives for each section, instructions, etc. A pleasure to work through. One of the things that we were doing quite consciously was to provide a best practice model. So, all of the inclusions of those different parts of the Moodle site were there because we specifically chose them to be there in order to show our educators what needed to be there. And the last one, the pedagogy that is embedded throughout it. I'm drawing upon these references in my online prac handouts, practicals, and pre-practical materials, so students can also know and understand the value and importance of for social presence in an online environment. So this last comment is very important to me and goes to some of the things that I'm studying at the moment, in that we have to be not only modeling, it rolls downhill, if you will. The instructional designer models what the teacher should be doing in the design of the educational experience. The educator then takes that and models what the students should be learning, but also how they should be learning to the students. Then the students do those things and hopefully learn. It's the pedagogy needs to be embedded, and there needs to be awareness of the sort of the metacognitive thread that underlines this whole process. And that was one of the things that we identified right at the beginning. Is we need to know that we're going to be giving examples, either consciously, or specifically or explicitly pointing these out, or just implicitly adding them to our instructors' sort of skill sets. So finally, A couple of important learnings that came through this process. The first one, Google doesn't work in China. I don't know how many times we forgot this one particular issue. We would say, oh, we'd do something and film it and put it on YouTube, and then we'd put the YouTube into our site, and then someone would go, hey, is that YouTube? And we go, oh yeah, that doesn't work in China. It was a frustrating and recurring issue that was happening throughout the whole process, or certainly the beginning of the process when we were dealing specifically with China. More broadly, there's no one-size-fits-all solution here. While I work as part of a central unit at the university, I'm not in a specific faculty. So although our team is trying to sort of build something that will help everyone, we do that knowing that there are going to be other things that come along for different people, things that are specific to what they're doing. The other thing here, working from home is more challenging than I thought in terms of being distracted and constantly eating, but hashtag pants optional. Apparently I can't spell optional, damn it. Number 4, instructors are passionate about their subjects and sometimes are quite rigid in terms of how they would like to have that content delivered. So one of the things that a lot of instructors began this process with was that they were just going to record a 2-hour lecture of them speaking to the camera, put that online and be done with it. And of course, that is not going to work. A lot of people needed to be cajoled and sort of brought into the fold, as it were, to really get on board. And I'm glad to say that we won a few friends amongst the academics. And finally, the platform you choose is never going to be liked by everyone, including the students. I think someone earlier mentioned that they disliked Moodle. Who was that? Julian. Moodle is what it is. I mean, I don't have an option. It's what the institution decided it wants to use forever. It was there before me and it will be there after me. It's not going to help. People don't like Zoom. People love Zoom. People are now paranoid that Zoom is a security threat. The platform you choose is never going to be liked by everyone, but you try and work with it and see how far you can go. And in some instances, you actively design or you actively teach around the platform as much as possible. So with that, I noticed there has been a couple of questions, some of them being, are these videos public? The ones of the students, they are unlisted on YouTube. So if you know how to hack YouTube to look for unlisted videos, good luck to you. They are obviously the property of the University of Wollongong, but I can't share those. What I can do is share my slides, and a couple of people have asked if they can get a copy of my slides. I'm assuming it's because people quite like the coronavirus images. Sure, there's actually a link on my YouTube live stream page, but I will add that to the chat in YouTube right now. There it is there, and I'll also put it in the channel in Slack so that everyone can get a copy. And there you go. And I think Aaron's going to post those on the speaker page. So I believe there is about a 30 or 40 second delay between me saying things and you hearing them. So does anyone have any questions? I think we've probably got time for maybe 1 or 2 quick text-based questions if the 19 people remaining in the room would like to ask one, either via YouTube or Slack. Realm Research says, very topical and candid. Thanks, Stafford. Oh, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. It's I miss KoTESOL a lot, so any opportunity I can get to sort of turn up there. I'd like to know who else is watching. I know Mike's watching, and I saw Petter in there a while ago. But who else is watching? Just tell me in either Slack or in the live chat, just so I know who's here. Some erstwhile Korean people I haven't seen in a couple of years, hopefully. Don't be shy either, by all means. Chuck your name in the chat, say hi. This, of course, will be available afterwards as well. I think Aaron's going to put it in the speakers page in the conference websites, KOTESOLconf.com. Hi, Angela. Now I've gone into Twitch streaming mode, which is a bit different from... Oh, and Amanda is in the room. Hi, Amanda. All right, so with that, I think I will stop there. Those of you who know me know how to get in touch with me. Those of you who don't, but maybe have some questions, I'm Stafford at uow.edu.au. You can also find me at tsolmedialab.com or our Twitter, tsolmedialab1. I also have two. And our Instagram, tsolmedialab. We are, I think it's only me posting there at the moment, so you'll only get shots from sort of my adventures, but other stuff is there as well. But otherwise, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. I think there's just the closing ceremony to go, but I take the very quick opportunity to thank KOTESOL and all of the organising committee for the national conference. It's not an easy job, I know that one from experience. And of course, having the whole thing called off because of a pandemic is another wrinkle which I'm glad I never had to experience as a national conference chairperson. But well done, everyone. Thank you very much, and I hope we talk again soon. Bye-bye.